Little tiny anyway. Can you play hockey or what?
I call this meeting to order for the Board of Building Regulation Examiners and Appeals for September 12th. If you would please remind yourself to turn your cell phones to mute so we have a least amount of interactions. I appreciate that. Please take roll.
Okay. Mr. Steele?
Here.
Mr. Straight? Mr. Pradine?
Here.
Ms. O'Donnell? Here. Mr. Brigham? Mr. Markinson is absent. Mr. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Looney?
Here.
Mr. Murchis?
Here.
Mr. Boney?
Here.
Mr. Feller?
Here.
Mr. Hopkinson?
Here.
Okay.
Quorum. We have before us an agenda. I would like to recommend reorder of the agenda here a little bit as far as needs here. If we could take unfinished business and move that to 4. Add in if staff would like the opportunity of staff presentation at 5. Public hearing is 6. Finish request 7, and new business will go from 8 down. If that's acceptable, I'll entertain a motion to order the agenda.
Ask a question, does the staff presentation doesn't have anything to do with item 4?
Well, it is directly was responsible for item 4, and that's why we're here at item 4.
But it sounded like you moved it after their staff presentation after.
Well, that's part of unfinished business.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the subject, and then it's the steps in the thought process.
So moved to adjust the agenda.
All in favor? Second. Any opposed? We got it. Okay, we got an agenda. We don't have any meeting minutes that we need to go through. So we can go into unfinished business regarding AO 2012-62. We have an S1 version that has been handed out. If anybody needs a copy, they're in the back. And hope everybody in the board has a copy. And would staff like to make a presentation of where we are, how we got here?
Very briefly, if you don't have a lengthy presentation, just kind of recap for the members who are not part of the 3-member work session committee. You recall in your last meeting on the original version of this ordinance, there were several questions raised, concerns about language. So the board tasked a 3-member committee to meet and determine if they could come up with some recommended language that would resolve the concerns brought up at the prior meeting. There were 2 meetings held, one 2 weeks ago, which would have been August 8th, 2 weeks ago was not August 8th.
Oh, no, the,
29th.
29th and so.
And then, they weren't able to complete the business. So it was extended, that work session was extended to last week, September 5th. And the rest of the business got worked out there just so that people know. Some of the folks present here tonight, I believe representing the home builders, came forward with some additional language. We confirmed that the bill sponsor, Mr. Copley, was in support of their efforts to come up with additional language, and so that became the basis of the work sessions, was to wade through that, see how that worked. And we were able to come to conclusion, and that's the result of that is the ordinance you have before you tonight. Jerry or Ralph, did you need to add?
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, and I don't know if the board wants to act on it, I was not here at the meeting on the 20th. I did not have, or take the opportunity to listen to the tapes. I don't know if there's any concern with continued participation in this issue. That's the first item, and I guess the second item is moving forward. We're seemingly here to craft words for a municipal ordinance. Is that the intent, that we're crafting the ordinance and then it'll go forward for action, or are we summarizing suggested points that need further evaluation or valid points, or what exactly is the goal of tonight's effort?
Would you like that?
When the work session committee was tasked with bringing back language that they felt responded to the initial concern. I would say, and the chair can make a call on this himself, the version before you is quite radically different from the original ordinance. In form, substance, function, completely radically new. So, and all of this, the board was emailed a copy of that, and so I would say you're all starting from the same place, pretty much, except that the items of concern that were there before have been resolved out of it. So I think the appropriate goal tonight is to discuss the ordinance that's before you and determine if you wish to recommend to the Assembly. I believe this will be before the Assembly on the next meeting, the 25th, naturally in this form.
So it would be a formal recommendation
Right.
in favor, against, or favor.
Or decide not to take a position for, against, or no position at all. And this also is important to note, and I'm sorry I overlooked this, this coming Friday, the 14th, 11:30, the Assembly is going to take this up again at a work session. We are hopeful that we don't have the attendance problems of the last Assembly work session, and that they'll be able to take a look also at this new language and work from that. When you get to comments, the comment part of the meeting, I think some of the folks in the audience can fill you in on what they think the bill spots are. If the intent, I believe the intent is to bring this to the work session on Friday. Or maybe through the chair, you could ask that of the participants in the audience right now, because the folks who are here should know.
In recap, the things that the board discussed last time we were all together kind of boiled around two items specifically, and one of which was insurance requirements that was discussed in there. There was language regarding professional liability insurance, if that was the right type of insurance, how much insurance should be covered, wasn't specifically stated. There were a few other items regarding liability insurance. Self-certification, and some of the process that was a little unclear, that if a designer that was non-registered designed it, what was the process that through the structural review and acceptance? If a structural engineer designed it, what would be the process toward structural review and acceptance? And the same process for a designer and an architect going through the life safety. The three-member board sat down specifically with, we made up a list of items that were of concern, and then started plowing through that to resolve these conflicts the best we could. The objective wasn't to come up with something that we felt was necessarily acceptable, but was doable, was the objective. So we have not made comment whether we endorse this or not, do not endorse this, but we needed to make it a workable document. Any further comments from Mr. Verdeen and Mr. Straight to bring everybody up to speed on where we are to date. Mr. Straight?
Mr. Chair, I would just reiterate that we need to make sure that this is the version that Mr. Trump will be moving forward with. We've been told it is, but that was a week ago and a lot has happened since then. So I didn't just put together. I want to make sure that this is the version that we're talking about. Moving forward off of.
And we can address that when we have public hearings from Mr. Taylor, if he can address that specifically. I think he's the person closest to this and address that. Mr. Freed?
I think you summarized it quite well. The other aspect that at that time, this has not gone back through risk management, at least the version we had seen. So there is a possibility that this still might change again once it goes through municipal risk management and their attorney before it gets back to the assembly.
That is correct, yes.
And to touch on that, I mean, Mr. Chair, I believe risk management will be present at the work session Friday. There has been a change in personnel. Mr. Smith is retired in the interim time. Long-time manager of that department, and his second in command also retired in the interim time. So one named Connie Ernst is the acting risk manager. I believe Mr. Smith brought her fairly up to speed on the items, and she has seen the language that was in the ordinance as of last Wednesday night. I don't think that language will change much. And Mr. Wheeler said that he would talk with her today to make sure that she was aware of the work session and would ask for the record.
Any other questions for staff at this time? Hearing none. We'll conduct a public hearing, and if anybody would like to speak for the ordinance at hand, this is your opportunity.
Well, I'll just clarify, Mr. Straight, that Mr. Trombley has taken this version, this S1 version of the ordinance to Julia Tucker. She's the counsel. And it should be, I'm not 100% certain that it will be reviewed by the work session on Friday. But this is the version that will go forward to the work session. And Mr. Ferdini, it's possible that there may be some changes, clarification from risk management at that time.
And for the record, I know it seems silly, but could you state your name? Please.
I'm Bill Taylor, Colony Builders, representing the home builders.
Any other public testimony?
Oh, sure, why not? This is Colin Maynard, sort of wearing two hats today. I'm a member of the ALS board who took a position on this ordinance, and I'm also a board member of the Alaska Professional Design Council. The ALS board has, at least the chair and I have looked at this revised bill, the S1 version, and it appears to satisfy the requirements of licensing laws. You're not requiring a structural engineer to do fire safety reviews or an architect to do structural reviews, so it would meet the criteria for the state law. APDC hasn't taken a position on this current one, but the President and I had one concern that's related to the insurance. And we thought that item C3D on page 3 of 8 about the liability insurance should actually be a subparagraph in number 4, because really the insurance is to make sure that whoever is indemnifying the municipality has insurance to make sure that they can do that. If you're not suing, which is what item 3A says, then you don't have to worry about the insurance part. The other point that we have on behalf of the design profession is we're not exactly sure why it's the reviewers who are indemnifying the municipality and get to pay for their attorney's fees when they're going to spend 4 or 5 hours on this and have a very small fee, and the builders are the ones that are getting all the advantage out of this, and they're not indemnifying anybody other than agreeing not to sue the municipality. So, that's my testimony.
Questions for Mr. Maynard? Yep.
So, in your opinion, let's say a project was reviewed under this process, and it was certified by an engineer. Later, there was found to be a construction defect related to the design. I guess in what circumstances, who would be sued, in your opinion?
In my opinion, everybody and their brother would be sued. It would be the original designer, it would be the reviewer, it would be the builder, and possibly the municipality, although that's going to be an exercise of futility because they're basically exempt anyway.
What the question I'm
But to
asking.
get out of that, then somebody has to pay their attorney fees under this, and they're not having the original designer who made the mistake. You're not doing the builder who's getting the highest profit out of this. You're doing it the reviewer who didn't catch somebody else's mistake, which to me is not the right person.
Other questions for Mr. Maynard? Seeing none. Any other comments from the floor?
If I could, my name is Don McClintock with Ashburn Mason. We've been working with Mr. Taylor, and first of all, appreciate the efforts by the three-panel board last time. There were quite a few mechanical issues with the prior version that the panel put up a lot of work into, as well as it's Colin and Mr. Maynard. And so I do think the current S1 version is technically appropriate. The policy question still remains whether there should be an alternative to going through the city process. I think the home builder's view was, right now, you can get a permit for this type of construction without any sort of professional review. So a little bit of the incentive or carrot was we would have a higher standard of professional blessing the documents and reviewing it, which would provide a better result for the consumer. Quite frankly, the indemnity provisions are something that have been imposed upon the city. I think Mr. Moody's question, or what he led to, is quite right. The city has sovereign immunity. It's not particularly difficult to get a case dismissed, but risk management seems to insist on this sort of language. So we don't think it's a great provision, but it's one that we're sort of captive to. So that's why it's there, and really for no other reason. Mr. Meader's absolutely right. If there's litigation, I think probably everyone, probably except for the city, because if you're spending with your salt, you're not going to sue someone you're going to lose to right out of the bat. But not every attorney perhaps meets that criteria. So the risk is there. And the builders will always get sued. There's no question about that. And you now have potentially another private party who will be there. But I don't think decisions on process like should be driven or forestalled by litigation, because every time a professional steps on the line, there's a risk of, professional error, there's a risk of litigation. I think the question that we would put to the assembly is, should the consumer have this as an alternative? Is it mechanically one that meets needs and it will improve the product? So that's, I think, why we're asking for your endorsement at this time.
Other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Pelmer?
going back to Mr. Taylor, do you feel that this ordinance accomplishes what the Homeowners Association has wanted to get out of this ordinance?
Yeah, I think at this point, we have a good product, and it accomplishes, it's slightly different than the original vision, but boy, it's pretty darn close.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Steele?
Mr. McClintock, your use of the term the consumer and ultimately the value of serving the consumer, you may not have had the long long history that the home builders have in this process, but do you really think this is a grassroots coming from the consumer, or is it more driven by the home builders?
Oh, no, obviously, it's the home builders who've carried the water to bring this forward. I think the question for the body is it a process that will result in a better product for the consumer, whether they're asking for it or not?
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. McLean? Any other speakers from the floor? Last chance? Okay. Hearing none, we'll close public hearings. And open for discussion. Questions?
I have one question. In this process, the standard construction review is still going to happen?
You mean as far as
Inspections? Yep.
Chair, Mr. Looney, this ordinance does not appear to change the inspection process at all. So municipal inspectors will still be doing the inspections. Staff does have some concerns about that because if there's a dispute, the inspectors are put in a position of bringing that to both the original designer and the certifier, and if it becomes a dispute, then it needs to come back into the department through planning supervisory channels to help resolve. So we see that as a potential delay at the construction phase of the project. Whereas now, if there's an issue in the field and they're working off approved plans, we can sort those out much more quickly.
And I guess the reason for the question, if I can continue, is if the current process, you guys are the final arbiter during the plan review, and but if we have a third-party certification, the final arbitration may happen during the construction inspection, in which case it would almost certainly, if it was required rework, then it would almost certainly result in some sort of legal action against the reviewer or the original designer. I mean, you probably can't say that.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Lee, that's essentially correct. The final arbitrator, actually, under the building code, is this body. But the process typically is that if there's during plan review, if there's questions brought up by the municipal plan reviewers, then they work with the designer until those are solved to the satisfaction of the department, and the plans are staff approved. And the inspector's job is to is essentially check to see that the contractor is building according to the approved drawings. Now, if the inspector may notice something that's not according to approved drawings and question that, or they may notice something that may actually be according to approved drawings, but the inspector, from their experience, may still feel that something's not code compliant and raise that issue. We do typically get some comments. It's not the inspector's job to review plans in the field, and we have some, and we give some credence to that, and that's why we prefer to have all the issues worked out before the drawings go to the field. So it'll be uncharted territory, but when I was working with legal when the original ordinance came out, there's other places in the code that reverts back to the building official to look at, whether or not something applies to the code. And they felt that if that kind of issue was brought to our attention after one of these projects a permit had been issued, we still had the authority and the duty to question the situation and try to get it fixed.
So I guess the summary of this is, would you expect those types of conflicts to stay the same, increase slightly, or increase significantly?
Well, I'll speak to it, and then Ross may want to chime in, but the difference that we see is that our plan review group works very hard to be consistent. They have a weekly meeting where they sit down and talk about different projects that are coming through, and, you know, what, they're seeing something that's unusual, and how is it to be interpreted. And so all the people reviewing plans understand that when we see this kind of thing, this is how we'll interpret it. What we see with this ordinance passes, that, you know, different designers will see things, see code, interpret code in different ways. And so we do think it's more likely, at least in the initial runs of this ordinance, for more questions to come up, because people may review it, interpret code differently, or just not agree with the code and decide that, you know, that the way they're looking at it is the best thing for their customers. So we do see some problems, potential problems there.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Steele?
I guess I'll just throw these out. I don't know if there's really a body to respond, but maybe it's dialogue, or maybe some of the previous people that spoke can add to it. I just went through and read and came up with some overtones that I guess I'll just throw out for discussion. In the preamble for the ordinance, it's making reference to a registered design professional for the designated permit application. Yet it seems the whole ordinance is contingent on this independent reviewing professional as being the key to, I mean, obviously there's certification, but this professional reviewer is the key. And I'm wondering why this is, the preamble of this beginning isn't speaking to that issue as well, or that role of that individual. That was just one point. The next thing as I go through, I would suggest going through here and doing a clean sweep to use the same terms for independent reviewing professionals. I mean, sometimes it's professionals in brackets, sometimes it's singular, sometimes it's just referred to as the reviewing professional. So I would suggest that. And then that led me to believe, as I went through this, that I'm wondering if definitions of roles and responsibilities wouldn't be appropriate as part of this ordinance change, since the title being amended does have a section dealing with definitions and kind of a lot of other components or individuals that have roles in the project. Should there be a definition of what constitutes an independent reviewing professional? And then also would speak to the design professional, registered design professional responsible charge is recognized with the current Title 23, but as I read this, they're not really the key individual. They're a piece of this in terms of getting the permit, and I'm not speaking or seeing the relationship of the design professional and the independent reviewer. And maybe it's written that way so there's latitude, but it seems that each could be working for a different party or a third party. Could the design professional hire the reviewer? And then when you start looking at those structures, you then get into the question of liability and coverage. But I'm just wondering if more clarity as to those roles would be appropriate in the ordinance. I don't have the background, and I'm hearing it's being discussed by risk management, but I would throw out to all participants that has anyone contacted a insurance carrier for liability insurance that serves Alaska to review the implications of this, and is it available? I mean, when you talk about these levels, certifying something and definitions of certification, you begin into, I'm wondering, some positions, are they going to provide that coverage that everyone is seeking and hoping will be in place? And then the last piece is, under the maintaining professional liability insurance, it talks about maintaining it, but I'm wondering, has anyone considered that there actually has to be a submission of an insurance certificate or evidence of coverage with each plan application that is specific to that plan? Or is it just being talked about in general that yes, that individual will carry insurance and yes, we will be fine, and there's no limits to how many of these projects are occurring? I mean, oftentimes when we work with a client, we're asked to provide evidence of insurance that's project specific. And I'm just wondering if there's been any discussions with the community at large, and again, with insurance carriers about any requirements that are appropriate. And then the value of $250,000, I know from liability there can be a wide range of coverage, but why a minimum of $250,000? Is that evaluated based on the exposure of what damage that individual might do? Because I could see a home costing well over $1 million, and I don't know what the spinoff would be, and I'm just wondering what was the threshold for the minimum of $250,000? So some are comments, some are questions. I just throw it out from reading the document.
Ms. Walsh?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Steele, the insurance provisions are still problematic. Again, risk management hasn't had time to weigh in on them yet. I can tell you, though, that research, both by ourselves and by the home builders community, is the insurance is available, and it's much less expensive than we might have expected, especially people who are seeking insurance policies 15 or 20 years ago when the market was not soft. So it is available.
To the independent
reviewer.
As well as the designer.
To the independent reviewer, and of course, there's the cost of the insurance varies depending on the person's specialty. Structural is more expensive than, say, electrical or mechanical. It depends on how many projects they have behind them, because the more projects you're hanging out there for, the higher your premium, which is counterintuitive. You would think with more experience you'd be less cost, but no, because you're insuring all the stuff that's behind you. Insurance is usually made on a claims-made basis, so it's the insurance that you have in the force at the time somebody brings in a claim, not the time when the project happens. So those are still problems. There is there's an attempt to try to handle the coverage and have it extend at least 2 years past the completion of construction. And the independent professional has to state when it expires and when it will be renewed to ensure continuous coverage for no less than 2 years from the date of completion. That brings up questions of the reviewing professional changes carriers. Will that same carrier extend the coverage? It brings up the question of what happens in the event that the defect shows up 3 years after the completion of construction, and some of these items do show up for foundation issues that take a while to develop. So there's still problems with the insurance in general. Evidence of a certificate. We anticipate that we would have to change some of our procedures if this is to become law, and that would involve, revising the application to show that this person was choosing this option, and we'll have to go through and we'll have to do those logistical things, and that would be, I anticipate, something we would ask for, is that, okay, you need to give us, to show evidence you comply, you have to give us this insurance certificate.
So if I may not interrupt, so those would be, you feel that the language here, those would be follow-ups in terms of the policy or a procedure, and don't need to be part of the ordinance?
I don't think so. Maybe Mr. Weaver can give guidance on that, but it's, just something we would have to adjust to make our processes fit the new requirements. And in terms of the value, I can't say where that number came from. I know the prior versions of the ordinance, the prior risk management person had communicated to Mr. Conley some values that were excessive to that. I believe it was similar, I believe it was in excess of 250. And the first version, the One version, I think, came out with no limits, or just said requisite insurance, and that was one of the problems that, was finding out with that before. So I can't speak to where the 250,000 came from.
I'd like to back up a little bit here, move a lot of order that we should entertain a motion toward the ordinance, please. And go into the discussion further. Mr. Steele?
I would move that the board recommends the building official inform the Anchorage Municipal Assembly in writing of the position of the board regarding the proposed ordinance AO 201262S1. The board recognizes the Anchorage Municipal Assembly may choose to adopt this version or a further modified ordinance to provide the option to exempt single-family and two-family residential construction from plan review by the municipal building official. If the Assembly chooses to enact an ordinance based on this exemption, we suggest the following items be considered further and, if appropriate, incorporated in the final version. 1, liability and responsibility for the design professionals and the independent reviewing professionals is not fully understood. Is the design professional in responsible charge of overseeing and coordinating the efforts of the independent reviewing professional? Question mark. Is the design professional in responsible charge required to carry the same liability coverage and responsibility as the independent reviewing professional? Question mark. 2, clarify the responsibilities of the registered design professional in responsible charge and the independent reviewing professionals. The ordinance states the independent reviewing professionals can't serve as the designer or builder of the project. Perhaps definitions of these titles in the order could be incorporated into 2310-1021-definitions. The ordinance uses the following terms: independent reviewing professionals with parentheses. The reviewing professionals suggests the same term be used throughout the ordinance. Note the ordinance preamble contains the language when a registered design professional. Should this state independent reviewing professionals? Question mark. Has there been any research by the MOA to confirm professional liability coverage is available with insurance carriers serving Anchorage? Question mark. A minimum coverage of $250,000 is required. Evaluation of many residential products could well exceed this threshold. How is this amount of coverage established? And 5, we suggest the ordinance include the requirement that proof of insurance coverage be submitted with the application for the project being submitted. I thought a lot about this today and typed it out. If you would strike paragraphs 2 and 3 in what's typed here.
That's several copies there. I can make more copies.
I made like 12 copies, so there's,
Would you like to show the strike and I can make some copies? Change. You like that?
I think you kind of overwhelmed our secretary here.
in time I should have said before that I had it written. Sorry.
I think you lost her just about the second sentence. So you're proposing to strike which ones, please?
Paragraphs 2 and 3, the position of the board and the proposed ordinance represents.
Okay, those paragraphs in their entirety are removed.
So it has paragraph 1, the abbreviated recommendation that the building official inform, and then the board recognizes municipality may choose, and then the points below were just like questions, obviously, and they may be appropriate for some modifications or enhancements, but my intent, but maybe I should have a second before we...
So before we do that, can I make a friendly amendment?
Well, let's do the second on the board first, please.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
Now, open for discussion.
If I could just, the intent here of my motion was, in my original writing, it was taking a stronger position that maybe we as a board come out yay or nay. I was in the tendency of saying nay, there's no reason for the ordinance. But I think in reality, what we're looking at here is we're a group that is the focus of this, and it's going to go forward whether we say yea or nay. I think it's of a political opinion, and it has obviously some support, so I'm of the mindset now to just remove any position from it and just say that this is going forward, but I think there should be some points here to look at. I don't think we should be tasked with wordsmithing a document to where we feel comfortable, because this is going to go through a process beyond us, and it's going to go through many iterations and discussions. So I think the focus would be to summarize, we've looked at it, and we have some points that we think need further consideration or evaluation. And it's not to say that we couldn't put a few in here that we say this works well in terms of responding to such. So that's what was driven, what I presented as a motion.
Discussions. Mr. Looney.
If I could suggest an amendment to this, I do think that second paragraph could state and should state that we are opposed to the ordinance in the current version, but with some additional work, as you've outlined, it could be something we would accept or improve on. Because in its current version, I think we need to state that we're not really in favor for it, or at least I would like to say that.
We haven't voted on that necessarily yet.
But the motion is asking the building official to give a position. Okay, and so I'm amending this, that if we want to go and have the building official tell the assembly that this thing needs some more work, okay, the motion should be that we oppose the ordinance as it is, but then the recommendation, as it says in the fourth paragraph, the board recognizes the assembly may choose to do it anyhow. And if so, these are some of the recommendations.
Would you like to speak to your motion, Mr. Seal?
Well, I guess I hear the point, but I'm not of the mindset to accept it necessarily as a friendly amendment, only in that, again, I think this has had a life so outside the board, and I'm still not fully understanding the intent or purpose or what all is being, who actually this ordinance is serving. And so my initial in writing this was saying that we're opposed to it, but then I started thinking that's probably not even going to get the light of the day of seeing hands raised one way or the other. So I guess I would speak more to a softer, that we've reviewed it and we've discussed it. And I'd just like to say that we think it has some things that need more work, and be silent to it. But as to whether we oppose it or, but your point of opposing it as written, has some merit. I'm just not comfortable right now without maybe more discussion.
Mrs. Bennell?
I'm having a little bit of deja vu. We've had 2 meetings on this that went quite long, and I think that it was mentioned right at the beginning that this version is very, very different than the one that was talked about the last time. And it's so different that, and you raised so many of the same points that we raised at the last meeting, where we were concerned about the wording and the wordsmithing of the wording and who it's addressing and what's driving this, and the insurance section was onerous and ill-defined, etc. That it produced 2 3-person panels to work out some of the issues and come up with, and I think a large degree, a lot of work on the home builders, how do we work this into something that's a little bit more flexible and provide some of the independent review that I think everybody wanted it to say, instead of something that was clouded and where you might be able to design something and review it yourself and submit it, which is the way the first one was written. Myself, I don't know that I support stating all of this. I think some of these things are grammatical considerations that I have no objection if somebody wants to clean up the grammar. But I think that I have a question, and I just want to put it out there because I'm still confused about the liability section. C3 comes out and says each independent reviewing professional shall either. And A talks about providing a waiver against claims against the municipality for all damages, et cetera. And then if you have either, then you don't have to have or. And or is maintain professional liability insurance. So you can either sign a document that says, I don't hold you responsible, or you can carry insurance for 2 years and provide insurance coverage, certificate, et cetera, et cetera. Now, these don't seem to be, I don't understand why you can walk away and not have to have providing any liability insurance, or you have to have the coverage. I'm not clear on this and what the intent is. Is the intent to absolve the municipality? Is the intent to protect the homeowner? I'm not sure. So in concept, in application, I don't find that I have an objection to this document in its current format, with the exception of this insurance section that's not understandable to me. And maybe it's just me, but I think this is a much better document than it was to start with, and I think it offers builders an option to have an alternate path that's still reviewed. That's all.
There is an or on the very end of 3A.
See the or? There is or.
There is the or. So that's two. Going back to what Mr. Rooney asked for a moment, if I may, that I would like to keep the motion on the positive right now. We'll vote on that, and should that fail, then we can look at other ways of putting this together. So if I may, I'd like to keep this one on the positive and moving forward. Yes, Mr. Lind.
So as discussion of the entire deal, not on this particular motion, but I think it all goes together. One is, it does appear to me that one option is for a certifier to submit to building official a waiver of all claims. And if he does that, he doesn't have to have insurance.
I read it.
Right, that's the way it's written. Is that the way it's intended? Is that it's either you certify, or either you submit a letter of waiver of all claims, or you have insurance, but you don't have to have both. That's the way it's written, and is that the intention?
I believe that's the intention.
Because that seems pretty weak, because a guy can write letters all day long, and he can do a bunch of really bad jobs, and then pretty soon, it isn't really worth a whole lot. I mean, insurance, at least you have something you can recover. The other statement I wanted to make is I did contact Leanne Boldenow with, she's a senior VP at Marsh & McKellen. She represents the major insurance providers for errors and omissions insurance in the state of Alaska. And in the conversation I had with her, she said that this was a very challenging ordinance. In the quote, it said, I wanted to point out a few areas of discussion for your reference. The situation can have significant adverse impact on licensed design professionals that provide the new service being contemplated in this ordinance. And when she said that, she means that it'll cost them a heck of a lot of money, okay, in their insurance rate. In exchange for what may be a nominal fee, they're being asked to review plans provided by a non-registered residential designer and actually test that they are in code. Okay, and certification, when you say certify to a design professional, that's like a no-no. You shouldn't, I mean, to offer a certification, because that implies we're guaranteeing that it meets code. Okay, and as we talked about, there are, right now within your own department, there are sometimes when there are disagreements from plan review to the inspection side when it meets code or how the code is applied. when we get into this situation, we're going to ask a third-party person to certify, but then there's going to be a different organization, municipality, do an inspection, they're almost certainly going to have conflicts. Okay, and so what that's going to do is that's going to produce claims. And whether it's the homeowner suing the contractor, who then turns around and sues, or if the homeowner sues the original designer and sues the certified engineer, it's going to produce a situation where pretty soon somebody's going to hit the end of their insurance, or the insurance rates in the municipality of Anchorage for errors and omissions for anybody practicing this type of work are going to be, you're just not going to be able to fill it. And she also stated in another email, I didn't bring a copy of that one with me, that this has been done in some other municipalities and cities throughout the United States, and what they've seen is a sharp increase in the construction claims that have resulted in lawsuits to architects and engineers. And again, so that was the basis of her concern over this ordinance and the way that we're asking a third party to certify or essentially guarantee that the design is going to be fulfilled. And so I'm not sure that you're going to get a third party designer to want to fill this role. Okay, and frankly, I think if you find a third party designer who's going to want to fill this role, that may not be the best designer to fill the role. Okay, but those are some of my concerns. I'm not sure how insurable this is. In the certification, I'm not sure what you're really going to get from the certification through this process.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Ms. Walsh.
If I may, I spent also some time with Parker Smith and Feet. This was discussed at the committee work session and their competing, and they had similar concerns. They did reiterate this coverage is available. Would we advise our clients to do this kind of work? We would tell them they're taking on a large liability for a small, very small rate of return. So we would really question which design professionals will be taking this on. Also, in other jurisdictions that I've talked to, in particular Pima County, Arizona, had a program like this in place, and they discontinued it. They had, after about a year and a half, they had only one architect who submitted on one project and then decided that they didn't want to participate in the program any longer either. So it has been true that other jurisdictions have not had the best success with this type of program.
Other questions from the board? Discussions? Mr. Chair? Mr. Feller?
So have the concerns that the three-member panel raised, have they all been met by this current ordinance?
Speaking for myself, I think we did come up with language that resolved the issues that we had concerns with regarding outlining the paths for this permitting, insurance requirements, et cetera. Mr. Stray, can you speak more toward this?
Yes, we'd come up with a list of concerns based on the previous meeting. We had gone through that list, and Wordsmith was willing to aware that it meets the desire of what the building community is trying to accomplish. I wouldn't say we're still completely comfortable with things like the insurance and all that, but our goal was to come up with a workable document.
So all your concerns have been addressed with this version of the ordinance?
I would not say all of my concerns have been addressed with this version of the ordinance.
All of your technical concerns or all your philosophical concerns? If we split them, we can probably answer the question with more definitive.
I shouldn't say your concerns, I should say all of the three-member panel's concerns.
Technically, have they been addressed?
I would say yes.
Okay. Mr. Ferdine?
I would say within our abilities of this ordinance, yes, the items that were out of our hands were some of the items with the risk assessment, which we are out of our hands. But yes, we did go through and we removed a lot of the items that would have made it a non-starter to begin with.
Okay. And another point, I mean, all this insurance discussion, when I read the ordinance, the insurance section, which is on page 3 of 8, I mean, option 3A is going to be, in my mind, is going to be chosen under every situation because there's no cost to it and there's no downside to it. I mean, you're weighting claims against the municipality, but the municipality is already indemnified by state law. So, I mean, I see in every case that option 3A would be chosen by the independent reviewer because there's no cost and no downside. So I think the insurance requirements are really kind of a moot point, the way the ordinance is written now. That's all my comments.
Other questions, comments? Mr. Newman?
So, one of the other questions I had is it says under item C, it says the building official will confirm the application meets the requirements of 7.1 and the application shall be accepted and the building official shall issue permit provided that permit application demonstration plan and specs have been reviewed by an independent review of the professional. And then been on, and then permit application review and professionals confirm the right of the independent review professionals have accepted responsibility. So all the building official has to do is say, was it reviewed by a third party? And then you're pretty much forced to provide a permit. I mean, it's not, I mean, you have no ability to, if this is a contractor who's pulled past one multiple times, if he, presents this, there's no other recourse for you other than just if it's got a third-party certification, the guy steps up, you have to give him a permit.
Through the chair, Mr. Looney, we anticipated, again, just like as we would be changing our application form, there would be certain steps we would have to take to be sure that essentials were met, i.e. that the person had a valid license in the state of Alaska for the work, that they're certifying or planned examiner license, for that part of the equation. If you go to page 4 of 8, the pertinent language is on ours, line 35. Can you bring that up, please? So page 4, it's right, going there, the underlined A. So application stamped, for applications submitted, if they meet, you say the basics, and we probably would require a certificate of insurance if that was the option, the letter or the insurance, then we're supposed to stamp it accepted. That's what the ordinance would tell us to do, so that's what would be our duty. Is that right, Gary? Is that what you said? Correct.
So I guess, Mr. Chair, Mr. Looney, that really raises a question, what happens if you actually see non-compliance in the plans? Or does the building official have any authority to audit? Those are some of the questions or issues that we would have.
There's no mechanism in what we have now.
Exactly. We just have to accept it as the way it appears right now.
And that's an issue that the municipal attorney also, he only had a brief look at this, I think he got it late yesterday. And he raised the same question about an audit provision. Other jurisdictions do have audit provisions, and the results of those audits have not necessarily been stellar. But I had asked legal earlier on, a couple of months ago, when this ordinance was just beginning to get reviewed, about that. And the position of one of the other attorneys at the time was that we always have authority in other parts of the title to, if we think something's been done by fraud or there's a mistake, we always have the option to question the item or the issue. But Mr. Wheeler on review, further review and after several months of discussion of this, did just today mention that to me, that, there probably should be an audit provision after all if this is going to go forward.
I have 2 questions for...
And excuse me, just to finish up on that. And Mr. Wheeler will be at the work session on Friday, so I speak to that December then.
Let me ask my question, because it's going to dovetail right into where you want to go. Two-part question. First part is, can you reiterate, I know you've explained this previously, not all the members were here, but nonetheless, I'd like to hear it again. Benefits that this document is bringing to the home builders of the municipality.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, maybe the home builders can speak to that issue themselves about the benefits to the home builders and what, they believe that will provide. So it's no surprise, we did not support the original ordinance. We don't support this ordinance. We still have the same fundamental issues with it.
That's the second part of the question, so let me get there in a second, if I may. Mr. Taylor, would you like to speak toward the benefits as you see them representing the Home Builders Association?
I believe you do have the letter. Did everyone receive the letter? I haven't.
No, they came in real late, so that hasn't gone around yet.
Okay, so for the record, Mr. Bond is distributing a letter that was received from the home builders on afternoon of the 10th, I believe. The email to the department. It was too late to make it into the packet. Of course, it's been kind of fast-track sending. We do have copies for it.
On the back of the front page there are 6 advantages listed out for us here. Anything to add to that list, or is that something of Richard can get?
I think that pretty well sums it up. We'll be happy to answer any questions regarding the 6 items.
And then the second part of my question is, what are some of the downfalls to this ordinance, Ms. Walsh?
We have, question, it really boils down to, is there specific value to review of single-family duplex residences by the municipal office? We believe there is. It's life safety and economic value to the individual, member of the public, and the community at large. To speak to the 6 items, will the AO allow builder to get a permit in approximately 5 days versus the current 15 days plus? That brings the question, is the current residential plan review process unreasonably lengthy? And will this ordinance shorten that time? The current plan review times, this is your turnaround for comments, which is discussed quite a bit at previous meetings, but it's 4 to 10 business days, and we're making 76% or so within 4 days, getting those first review comments back, and 96% within 10 days. So 10 business days, which is not in a reasonable amount of time. It's among the shortest in the country. That would be for a standard for most of the homes that we have. If we have an unusually complicated project, then it may take more time. Is this going to save time? Not necessarily, because aside from the municipal plan, or the building plan reviewers, there are other departments that will still need to review zoning, planning, addressing stormwater requirements that's contained within the ordinance and are still within municipal purview. They're unrelated to the building plan review, so depending on the length of time that takes, it won't reduce the time needed for those reviewers to do their work. So that will depend on, what's going on with those different departments. Will it shorten? So it may or may not shorten the time to actually get the permit. The design reviewer, the independent professional, is still going to have some time to review. So the original designer's done with their work, they'll still have to give it to the independent reviewing professional, and then we'll have to come in for the other municipal plan reviews. Will it shorten the time? Not necessarily. Does it provide more protection for the consumer by adding experienced professional engineers that's liable for the project? I think we've already discussed those items amongst yourselves to, completeness. It definitely does add professional engineering sign-offs on what otherwise wouldn't necessarily need that particular signature. Does it maintain the presence of the skilled structural inspectors with their aptitude for spotting weakness in the design? Yes, it does, and we're glad of that the inspection will still be done by the municipality. We've already discussed here tonight some of the problems with that, putting those inspectors in the position of essentially being the first municipal people to really look at the design. And it puts them in the position of doing somewhat of a plan review in the field, and that's always been contrary to what industry has told us that they want. The expectation is slow phase-in to allow the systems and process to adjust to a new method, minimal growing pains. I don't really have a response to that. I suspect it will take a little time for people to get their insurance in place, and so that's it just remains to be seen. Could be that way. Item 5, detailed plan review with the peer review of structural engineering. That's coupled with, that's essentially saying the same thing that item 2 does. Will it relieve pressure on MO plan reviewers and free up resources, allowing permits to be processed more quickly? Not necessarily. If the design community doesn't step up and participate in this process, and it experiences some of the low rates of participation that other jurisdictions have seen, they won't necessarily have that benefit. Problems that we have with it?
If I could expand on number 6, Mr. Chair. You know, if this is popular and people do use it a lot, that's obviously going to have a negative impact on inspection, because issues that should have been caught in plan review are now going to be caught in inspection and slow down inspection, which will impact the whole industry trying to get their same-day inspections. If it's not used, then obviously that won't impact inspection on item number 6 there.
Will it save money for the applicant? We expect that it won't, because they'll be paying for the reviewing professional, and the reviewing professional's rates are going to reflect, in some respect, the amount of risk that they're taking on, and the insurance that they have to buy. And it won't necessarily shorten the overall construction process and the time required to obtain a CO, because of the potential problem for field issues. It will be more time consuming and more expensive to resolve a problem in the field when you have, the crews are working and then concrete delivery has to be delayed or whatever has to happen while disputes being worked out. And finally, there's remains the issue that we spoke to at your first meeting, that the passage of this ordinance by allowing the option for plan review outside of the building department will cancel the Residential Insurance Services Organization, or ISO rating, for the city of Anchorage. I do have, I believe we passed out at a prior meeting, an email from the ISO representative saying that when plan review is not conducted by the department, then that municipality is put in a class 99 class, which means chooses not to participate. And they simply don't give you a rating for residential review, or, well, commercial if you had commercial also. We presume we'd only lose the residential rating. Talked to other jurisdictions, Springfield and Wichita, and confirmed that they do not have a residential rating. These are other jurisdictions that do this kind of process. They do have commercial ratings because they do commercial review. The effect of that to the public at large is that it has a follow-on effect of flood insurance premiums. Let me back up. The ISO rating it's been a confusing topic for many, and one benefit of this entire process is that I think many of us in the industry, construction and design, and municipality side have finally really understood how the ISO rating works. But what happens is when you have a rating, the ISO files that rating with the state insurance office and recommends voluntary discounts that providers can apply for home insurance or for insurance premiums for properties. For Anchorage right now, it's a recommended reduction of 1 to 3%. The carriers actually may or may not apply that. They may, but whether or not they apply it, both of the major carriers, Allstate and State Farm, and most of the home insurance underwriting in town have told us they look at the ISO rating as a benchmark, but they will tell you straight out they don't necessarily used to apply those discounts across the board. They tend to have their own massive databases of loss records, and that's how they figure out their premiums. But they say they do, especially on the commercial side, but they say they do look at it. It gives them some idea. So can't say if that's really a loss to anybody or not if we lose that rating in that regard. However, in flood insurance premiums, the CRS group, which is the ones that provide those premiums, FEMA has included the Building Code Enforcement Grant Service, or the ISO program, as a prerequisite to their community rating program, which is CRS, for flood mitigation, and they require that a community receive a ISO Building Code Enforcement ratings class 5 or better for both commercial and personal lines in order to qualify for 6 or better in the CRS program. And that's a direct correlation to your ISO rating is what your flood insurance rating will be. Mr. Jeff Urbanis, who's our floodplain coordinator, will be at the work session on Friday, and he can explain better what that means, but essentially, directly, it would be a 10% increase in those people who have flood insurance policies. You can get from the Department of Commerce, Community and Economic Development, Community and Regional Affairs, the state FEMA flood insurance people, a count of how many policies are out there. There's 477 policies in Anchorage, total premiums $300,959. So if 10% change to that would be an aggregate $30,000 over the 477 homes. Does that seem like a lot? Depends on who you are and where you are following that average. But it will directly affect 477 homeowners in the municipality. So that is the disadvantage of this ordinance becoming law.
Did I understand you correctly that if the builder comes in with the documents that is gone through an independent review, he's got the 2 letters, one for life safety, one for structural, he's still not going to walk out permit in hand because it hasn't gone through zoning,
Correct.
addressing, et cetera?
Correct. And that's within the ordinance. It makes a point to note that those other reviews still need to happen.
Okay, and as the policy sits right now, as I understand it, the builder can walk in, submit plans, and get a F&F permit at risk.
Correct.
Okay. You wanted to make the point earlier, Mr. Weaver, did we get around to
Well,
yours?
since that raised hand,
Excuse me?
you covered all the issues.
Okay, that's what I was hoping we did, and it's time, thank you. Mr. Mooney?
You know, a question for Mr. Maynard. You know, point 2 of these 6 points says that AO provides more protection for the consumer by adding an experienced professional engineer that is liable for the project. But, you know, I guess I'd have to sit and really think about whether this certified engineer is liable for the project. He certainly has put his neck in the noose as far as potential for being sued, but I think the design professional, whoever did the design, would be responsible for the project. And I'm talking ALS, you know, looking at the, you know, the engineer's record. for something like this? Would the certifying engineer be responsible for the project, or just that he did a plan review?
Both. I know of at least one situation on a project up in Fairbanks where the original designer was sued. The original designer pulled in the reviewer and said, he didn't catch my mistakes, it's all his fault. And the reviewer was the one who ended up paying the most money, not the original designer that screwed up in the first place. So yes, you will have additional funds, but both of them will be liable.
Financially liable for
Yes.
error. And the potential, I really see the biggest winner out of all this is the Alaska Bar Association. Because, I really think it opens up so many different areas for some, a homeowner, a builder, what the design professional suing the certifier or vice versa. I just think it adds a whole level of complexity that I don't think is a positive initiative of what we're trying to do.
Other comments or questions?
Chair, I got a question from Mrs. Walsh.
Mr. Feller?
Going back to the insurance issue and the ISO rating, so for residences that are within the municipality but outside of the service area, so they don't receive a plan review, are their insurance rates higher than those residences within the service area that do receive a review?
We've asked that specific question of the insurance community, and they won't tell you, they'll tell you that it's proprietary information. In terms of the flood insurance, flood insurance is municipality-wide. I mean, the floodplain review is municipality-wide. We frankly are not sure if the distinction is well known, that the building safety service area is the only place where the ISO rating applies, and frankly, we haven't wanted to kick that off. It's a colloquial expression.
All right, thank you. Mr. Fernino?
I had two questions. I'll start with two. To the staff, the last sentence on that opening paragraph there about the additional reviews, zoning, planning, address, flood. I guess question 1A is, what is NPDES?
That stands for National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. It actually is the stormwater review. So there's a stormwater, right. They review for both permanent storm pollution controls, sediment runoff controls, and temporary construction controls. We tend to use stormwater as the temporary construction, SWIP type stuff, stormwater pollution prevention thing. But the NPDES refers to permit requirements. And the reason that they still need to be conducted is that most of those are actually required in other titles besides ours. There can be defined in code by Title 21, Title 24, zoning.
I guess
You're not under Title 23, basically.
the part of my question is that, do those review organizations require floor plans when they review that?
Typically, they require site plans, but
Okay.
not necessarily floor plans.
All right. And, excuse me, any feel for how long that process takes to complete the other? If we're shaving 3 days off of this process, how long does this other process require?
I tried to get that data, but the department that reviews that doesn't have an automated report to track their metrics like we do. But they only have like one person reviewing, the NFDS, so he's reviewing residential and commercial. So I know there's been times where he's been 2 weeks out and stuff, but I can't give you an exact number on when he's turning his reviews over for single families.
And does every project, whether it's an addition, major renovation, does that all go through that same process?
I think it's 500 square feet and bigger. All new houses, which this ordinance caters to. Do.
Or any addition greater than 500 square feet, between the two would be about probably 90% of this. Okay. It was mentioned also that once it gets approved, that the municipality does not have any ability to go back through and catch something, like if you were to do an audit of it or something like that, or you happen to know, boy, this guy always misses this and messes up their lateral or something like that. Under your current process, is there a way that if you were to, everybody went to a seminar and all of a sudden you went, oh geez, we've been missing this, is there a way you currently can go back on those projects that you've accepted a permit on, to be able to go back and go, hey, we have this one other comment?
Technically, we can, and if you look elsewhere in the title, it will say that the building official can revoke a permit that's known to be issued in error, which it would be an error if something wasn't in code compliance. But we have, it would depends on the severity of the issue. If it's a severe life safety concern, there are some retroactive fire provisions, I know. That, again, that's the fire folks that go back for that. Normally, in elevators, and there are residential elevators now. But those types of things are usually people are given a certain amount of time to bring it into compliance or fix it, similar to, think of it as a vehicle recall maybe. It's rare, it does happen. Typically, when we find an interpretation, we realize something's been interpreted wrongly or incorrectly, we tend to not go back and hunt down everyone who ever had that in their house, but we will take care not to perpetuate that error in the future and say from this point forward, this is how this will be interpreted. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, there's actually a policy and procedure in place that requires that we give the home builders a 30-day notice.
Well, everybody, the public.
That we discovered that we were doing this wrong or interpreting this wrong all these years, and 30 days from now, we're going to have to start doing it right.
So there would be no ability to, until the inspectors get out there, for the union to step in and protect the contractor from making very costly mistake that the inspectors are going to end up catching them, is kind of how that would end up rolling.
Yeah, I mean, the way this is currently written, it wouldn't even go to a plan reviewer. The permit tech would just approve the structural review of the county.
And I guess I have one other question back for the Home Builders Association. I was reading through the new letter and echoing previous comments. It mentions twice in here on item 2 and later on in the last paragraph. Both times it mentions experienced professional engineer that is liable for the project. And I know in our review meetings, that's what we were talking about, that was one of our biggest issues with the guy who got the $400 fee out of this X $100,000 house, is now, in twice on your letter, you're stating to the assembly they are going to be professionally liable for their $400 code review. I mean, I thought that was kind of one of the things that we were moving away from with this ordinance, so I was kind of wondering, is that still the intent of the Home Builders Association, is to hold the professional engineer, the reviewer, liable for their review?
Sure. For the record, Becky Wynn from Ashburn and Mason, been working with the home builders on this, and the point of raising that point because I think a lot of these questions about whether or not the review will be of high quality, there's sort of some question about the incentive of the reviewer to conduct a really thorough review. I just wanted to point out that unlike the municipal code reviewers, these individuals who conduct the private review would be on the hook if there was an eventual lawsuit. They would be subject to suit. They would be subject to personal liability for the implication of their review, whether or not they actually correctly caught any errors in the plan. And so the point of we're raising that point is to make it clear that these folks have anyone conducting this review would have a really strong professional, personal incentive to to be incredibly meticulous about what they're doing, because they would be liable in any eventual lawsuit as a private professional and not an agent of the municipality. They would not have the protection that a municipal code reviewer would have, so they would potentially be liable in a lawsuit. And there's really nothing we can do about that. If someone's home, if a consumer has an issue, they can sue both, the designer, the builder, the person who reviewed the plans. They can sue everyone. And so, but there's no protection for this plan reviewer. They do have that liability. And so, and with a corresponding incentive to be incredibly thorough what they're doing. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, if I could elaborate on that, I mean, the liability is not imposed by this ordinance. That is a liability that any professional carries, whether you're an architect, engineer, or a lawyer. You provide professional services in the private market, you're held to a standard of care. So that just exists. This statute does not set the rate that's charged. What it does do is it provides a market alternative, what's now frankly a monopoly which there is no recourse against for standard of care, timing, or anything, because the city's sovereignly immune, and they get it done when they have the resources to get it done. It may be that no one will ever use this because processes work so well, you take it away because it probably will be more economical to go through the city process. There are times, though, when the market may say, we need to pay enough money to get this project through, and they do. And I think you're absolutely right. A professional is not going to take $400 to do something like this necessarily. What that price is, that's what the market's going to set, and only time will tell. But this ordinance is really just to give that alternative a chance, and all the industries are going to adjust to it over time. The insurance industry will, the architect and engineer industry will, and that's the hope, is to at least give that an opportunity to work its way through.
Did answer your questions at this time? Yes, sir. Mr. Merchant.
I wanted to just clarify a couple things, I guess, and because I guess the way I'm looking at a lot of it is the Anchor municipality, we're going above and beyond on inspections, where I guess Wasilla, and of course this came up before, but Wasilla, Girdwood, Stuckey Heights, some of Upper Bear Valley, a lot of those areas doesn't even have a lot of this, a lot of where we go into this much detail to get it done, and there's not a whole lot of problems that I've seen. Maybe people have seen more than myself, but I live in an area here in Anchorage that I don't have to have inspections, and I built 2 houses in that, and it is I've never had an issue of structural, because everybody that builds these homes, most of the people are hiring people that are professionals in their industry. Whether they hire that person or they have the municipality look at it, there's 2 professionals looking at it. It is, you have 2 professional engineer work looking at the structural side of it, or you have Ross's team looking at it. I guess I look at it, that's no difference. Is one better than another? Is one going to make a mistake? Possibly, yes, but could be Ross and those guys. Are they going to get sued if something goes wrong, or is or the other guy? I think a lot of people take their job seriously. Those who don't probably won't be in that business too long. It is, I guess, is how I'm looking at it, is most of those guys, there's always going to be a crooked guy out there that does it, but most of it, like we all look at, these guys that have these engineers, they took a lot of time to get those engineer stamps, so it's not going to be something that they just give up in just by, I guess, making a bad call on a structural design, I guess. And so I guess that's how I'm looking at it. And I guess what I don't understand 100% is why we in the municipality, I know we do it to keep everybody safe, but are we going above and beyond? Are we going, which I think we are to a certain extent. I think we're keeping out a lot of riffraff, of course, but at the same time, Eagle River is building up nicely, Wasilla's building up real nicely, and I mean, Stuckey Heights, I mean, a lot of the homes up there, and then Girdwood, I've worked on 3 homes this year that are over $3 million, and all those are being erected and built up fairly nice. Are they going to fall down in a few years? I don't know, but majority of them, is that you see all around Anchorage, the whole municipality, Anchorage, Wasilla, and whoever, they handled those 130-mile-an-hour winds that we had there. So I guess that's where there's a little bit of confusion for me on this. This doesn't seem that bad. We're still going above and beyond what anybody and everybody else does. But it is, and I see we're reading very deep into this, which is, I think, good, but at the same time, I think we're reading so deep into it that it's causing a lot of confusion. I mean, we want it right, but how far do we go with that?
Mr. Chair, if I could respond partly and then Mr. Johnson perhaps. You're correct that many, probably all of the people in this room who are in the design and construction industry are performing to the standard of care that Mr. McClintock referenced. The problem is, once this ordinance is on the books, there really is no way of sorting out the riffraff, as you characterize it. It opens the door for some of the types of builders we saw in the 80s, in the booms of the 80s, for those who were here during that time. And those who were here during that time know there was some pretty shoddy construction put together around town. So it opens the door, and I don't know how we can close that. There is no guard against that 1%, call it only 1%. And it may not matter to the 90% of people whose homes are built by the conscientious designer and builder, but it's going to matter a lot to that 2, 3, or 10% that gets the big, bad, expensive problem. And these are more likely to be the people who can afford to fix a problem like that the least. So we're very concerned about that. And the other thing that this ordinance sets up, if you do have, I have a PE and I'm proud of it, and I've been very careful in anything I put my stamp on, but I also know that there's colleagues who have not been that careful, and you can go to the state records and see some of the actions have been brought against those few who have really caused 95% of the problems by 2% of the people. The problem with this that we see is it sets up a direct fiduciary relationship between the applicant for the project and the person approving the project. I'm paying you, Mr. Designer, to review or to design this house. I'm paying Mr. Engineer to review that design. Or it may be that I'm having the designer pay an engineer to review their design. The relationships, as Mr. Steele pointed out, are very open to problem. It opens the door to that 1% of bad apples, and that we see that as a deep concern. Finally, if you go to the very beginning of Title 23 and you read the intent of Title 23, the intent is to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. That's the code that this board is tasked with keeping care of, if you want to call it that. That's the code that all of us are tasked with upholding, and the Assembly is tasked with upholding. So the fundamental question is this ordinance, does it do that? Protect the health, safety, and welfare of the general public, and that's what the job is supposed to be.
If I may, being an engineer, I'm always kind of amazed at how people seem to put engineers up on a pedestal. And when I was in the private sector, I probably kind of felt that way, and then in a strange twist of fate, I ended up at the municipality. But, and I quickly learned that not all engineers are created equally, and there's a few people out there, I wouldn't say they're a minority, that produce less than code compliant work. And there are very few people that actually produce like really bad work. And there's a few designer engineer teams out there that my plan reviewers literally cringe when their projects come in the door and fight not to be the one that has to review it. And under this ordinance, they could actually elect to bypass their very lengthy process of trying to get their permit approved by, having their engineer certified that it's code compliant. So I'm not saying anybody in this room would ever use these people, but we actually deal with these people. They're out there. So That's my 2 cents really.
Mr. Rooney?
I think you've answered some of the questions I wanted to ask, but, you know, the state does not require this level of plan review for for 1 and 2 family residents, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so we're going beyond what the state requirement is, and again, it's per Title 23, protecting the, you know, safety and welfare of the public. You know, so we have an option to do nothing, to do no plan review. You can still catch it during the inspection process, which effectively is what we're doing in this. So I'd like to hear from you the difference, okay, in our rating. I think you spoke to the rating earlier. If we just eliminated plan review period for 1 and 2 family homes versus this, you know, putting this process in the books where we provide a less than municipal plan review process for 1 and 2 family homes. Is there much difference in what we're seeking?
My understanding from speaking with the ISO people, there's no difference. Unless all plans are reviewed by the municipal department, then even if it's partial or it's a 0, you still are in the 99 category, you know, choose not to participate. It gets back to the philosophy, Are strong enforced building codes important to a community? As you said, many communities don't even have them. The state fire marshal reviews by state statute, will look at commercial facilities, but they're not reviewed. Other than that, single family and duplex residences are not reviewed by anyone. And that's a position those communities, either because they can't afford to or just chosen not to adopt the international constructs. And somewhere along the line, probably after the 1980s, they got stronger. I mean, Anchorage has had building codes for a while, but Anchorage as a community decided to adopt building codes.
I think I recall it was sometime in the 90s, structural review was added. I think it was sometime in that time period, because I remember when that happened. You know, so conceivably, we could, in the spirit of what, you know, this ordinance is looking for, this revision, is just remove the requirement for plan review for 1 and 2 family residences, and instead enforce by inspection, which is effectively what you're going to do if people avail themselves of this method. And I mean, that would clear up. I'm not sure if that's something you guys want to do, but I mean, it kind of accomplishes the same thing. But instead of taking a guy and saying, "Hey, we're going to hire you for $400 or $4,000," and now your neck is in the loop, is in the news for being liable, it gets the contractor fully liable for the results of meeting code or not. I mean, to me, it almost seems like we're getting a fake scapegoat.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a quick comment on that?
I'll permit it.
Thank you. I think that probably what you're suggesting exists in many parts of the country, many cities. They have 0 plan review, and all the quality control is in the field. But that's not what we're doing with this ordinance. We're actually improving through, you know, a licensed professional who can't self-certify, so there's, you know, you can avoid that problem. And there's peer review. So, you know, we're meeting and exceeding what we have currently. And I think that's more meaningful than anything else that we can say, because the plan reviewers now are not licensed professionals. They don't even have ICC code certification or plan review certification. So, you know, we want this protection from a liability standpoint and from a professional standpoint, and we're adding this field inspections on top of it. So it's a meet and exceed what we currently have.
And if I could clarify on that statement, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
It is true that not every plan reviewer in our group has a plans examiner certification. We have a category of assistant plan reviewer and full plan reviewer. At present time, we have no assistant plan reviewers. The last person who held that position was promoted to be a full plan reviewer. By the project description, or by the job description for that person, they have 2 years from the time they're accept a plan reviewer, full plan reviewer position to obtain their plans examiner certification. So it is a requirement. All except that one person do have their plans examiner certification. It's also true that 2 of our structural reviewers do not have a professional engineering license. They do have degrees in civil engineering and have passed the fundamentals of engineering. They are encouraged to get their license, but they do not have it at the time. We do have a licensed structural engineer within the group that can be consulted and is consulted. The engineering manager is a licensed mechanical engineer, engineering services manager, Rob is a licensed mechanical engineer, and I'm a licensed civil engineer. So we do have licensed engineers in the department for overview and supervision, similar that most of you have in your own firm.
And Ron Wild's licensed
That's
civil
what I was
engineer.
referring to. And Ron Wild, that's what I was referring to,
Yeah.
licensed engineer.
And that plans examiner certification is kind of a misleading thing, because I'm not aware of any plans examiner certification that's relevant to the review of 1 and 2 family dwellings. The plans examiner certification that's required by our staff is a certification to demonstrate compliance with the building code, not the residential code, not the IRC. So it's not even relevant to this ordinance. And I guess the really relevant issues about this ordinance is the structural plan review, and more specifically, review of lateral force resisting systems.
Any more questions or comments? Mr. Gray?
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question to the board, to the builders, please?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor, maybe you can speak for all of your members. Ultimately, you guys are there for the consumer, the customer. The MOA is here for the consumer, customer, which includes you as a customer. Out of your customers, how many of those customers that came forward wanting a change to the existing ordinance? What drove this ordinance to be started?
How many hours do I have?
Well, we can make it brief. I mean, how many of your consumers have the need to change this to go to a third-party review?
It isn't consumer-driven, Mr. Gray. It's Mr. Gray, it's builder-driven. And to repeat, we have a short construction season. We have issues in plan review that we've tried to resolve over and over. I mean, I've been working with the home builders for over 20 years trying to resolve these problems. And through different administrations, through different building officials, and it's like deja vu all over again. We cannot seem to come to a reasonable conclusion on how to solve the problems that we have in plan review. So by virtue of that fact, we go, well, what's the solution? What's the ultimate solution that will survive administrations and building officials and plan reviewers? And that's to be able to increase the level of scrutiny that we currently have now, adding that professional, more liability that does incidentally protect the consumer, even though they're not asking for it, but they get the benefit of that. And this is a permanent fix. It survives all administrations, it survives all building officials, and it survives all plan reviewers. So that's really the core of why we're here tonight, trying to get your approval in this ordinance.
Thank you.
Not seeing any other questions or comments? Mr. Straight?
I have a comment back, looking at the motion that we're making now, in general, I feel it might be a little verbose and be taken as a, not thoroughly read by the intended audience, that being the assembly. I would feel perhaps we should come up with something a little more succinct and clear that gets our point across as to what that point is. I think we still need to figure that out for sure. And recommend or don't recommend this concept along with recommendations that, if we do recommend it, how it should be adjusted.
I've got a motion on the table that has been seconded, and I want to work with that one first before I deviate. It's a little bit more than a minor amendment to it, so. If there's no more comments toward this, I'd like to ask for the vote.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, is the intent that if this motion fails, that you would then proceed with action on another motion in lieu of amendment and going through the process? I mean,
Yes.
how many times are we going to take this up tonight?
Well, that's a good question. Where I'm at right now is, we've got a motion on the table,
Right.
as requested here. And I would like to give a vote on that one, and if that passes, I think we're probably done at that point. If it fails, it's kind of up for discussion if we want to take any position, or if we want to take a contrary position, or a positive position with some different language.
If I might, just from a procedure to keep things in a positive vein, if there's just comfort with this motion, and maybe I haven't had the time behind the table, all you have with the various subsets and meanings in the language here, I think it's more appropriate for this body to try to amend this to something that, through discussion and amendments, is supported and meets what everyone's intending, versus a negative vote. I think it is kind of a poor practice to vote something down and then move on with another motion. And from a discussion point of view, if the consensus of the board is that the way I've proposed this, or the language, just no one is comfortable with, but yet they're willing to go through a discussion and go through this in a pretty direct fashion, I would possibly entertain withdrawing my motion. But I just don't think it's a good process to vote it down and then pick up and say, okay, now let's get a motion that we're all willing to work on and get behind.
Well, it's kind of like where I was thinking about where you were going. Would you like to withdraw your motion? Mr. Linney?
I'll go back to what I was recommending early on as an amendment to this motion, okay, so we can vote on that before we vote on this motion. And we add a paragraph after the first paragraph of the motion that it would say, we do not recommend adoption of this ordinance as currently written. Okay, so then the correct motion would say, the board recommends the building official inform the Lakeridge Municipal Assembly in writing the position of the board regarding the proposed ordinance. And then the friendly amendment, or not so friendly, is we do not recommend adoption of this ordinance as currently written. Paragraphs were stricken, and it goes, the board recognizes the municipality may choose to adopt, and then it recommends some additional things that should be considered. And I'm suggesting that now we can vote on that, and if people want to change it after that vote to, we recommend you do adopt it, then we can act on it.
So there's an amendment to the motion.
So I move that we add that second paragraph.
And so we need a second. We'll discuss the amendment.
I'll second that.
Right.
If you write that down, please.
We're trying to get some little clerical work here done to help Tana with this, so keep things moving and not get wrapped around the axle trying to resolve this later on. So we're going to try to get some of these motions in the front. Discussion for this amendment. Mr. Freed.
Just as a item of what you're just doing right now, I think it's a great idea that we, as a board, moving forward, before we make motions, we should write them down and then submit them. So if you know you're going to make a motion, like for instance, if you are anticipating to add additional paragraphs beyond number 5, write them down. Sheets. Ahead of time, when now thinking about it, and so we can give it to, so she can put it up there so we all can see the verbiage.
Anybody want more paper?
Sure.
Mr. Stewart.
Just to reiterate my point, I feel that as a board, we should have a position on this, yes, no, or indifferent, and then we can follow that up with recommendations for the language, but the Assembly is looking for us, to have a position on it. They want us to use that. And I'm recommending it's just a letter saying this needs to be revised, and then we'll come up with a position. That's basically what we said the last time. And if every time we keep saying it needs to be revised and never make a position, we're eventually going to stop reading what we send them. If they read anyway.
So ultimately, we want to come to some harder language that I understand.
I'm thinking that's what the sentence I mean.
I agree. Other comments? Regarding Mr. Willie's motion to add, we do not recommend adoption of this ordinance as currently written. You had some work to that?
No, actually, that's the entire second paragraph.
Sure.
Mr. Feller.
We've gone through this process several times now, and we created a 3-member panel to identify issues that needed to be addressed. I've heard from that panel that those issues have been addressed. I think we have a responsibility, the board, to, as Mr. Straight was saying, is to, move forward a recommendation to the Assembly as to whether we support this ordinance or not. I think the way the ordinance is written now, I think it does work. And so for those reasons, I will not be supporting the amended motion.
I think we're acting on the incorporation of the amendment first, and if it's incorporated, then we'll back to the deliberation of the
Motion is amended.
Yes.
I believe that's...
I'm making some comments before we vote on the amendment.
Understood, thank you.
Other discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. We can just go by hand vote. Raise if you're in favor. 6, opposed to 4. Are opposed over here, please, Ms. O'Donnell and Mr. Gray. Need to stop. Okay. Okay. It was 4, right? 2 over here. Mr. Rosen, no.
Would it help to have a roll call vote?
We're trying to speed it along here by doing everything else, so. 6-4. Okay, 6-4, so that does pass to add that language. Anything before we vote on the overall motion? Mr. Straight.
Yes, I'd like to really put the question to the board. We discussed this over and over again, really at the details levels, but we haven't really considered the question of do we approve of this option as a whole. And I'd like to step out and say that I will vote against the motion as a whole, because I think that this, as it's written, will work. I think it provides a viable alternative for the building community to work the process in a way that they can shorten their schedule. By the time you go through 2 or 3 review cycles, you could be a month or 2 out. So I feel that this would be a way that maintains the same level of security for the eventual homeowner, while shortening the process and allowing the building community to do a better job, do their job in a better way, and put out a better product really at the end. I think also, just looking at it from the standpoint of risk, it is, right now, the way it's set up, the Designer Center downtown goes through the same level of scrutiny as a single-family home, just from a policy standpoint, from the way the code is written. So it makes sense for 1- or 2-family dwellings to have an alternative route that can take a different path, have a third-party review. Because of these reasons, I disagree with the current motion. I will not be supporting it, and I feel that this ordinance should be passed and that we should forward our approval to the Assembly.
Ms. O'Donnell, excuse me.
I agree with Mr. Straight. I believe that the work of the 3-person panel did largely address the concerns that we had with the ordinances presented at the last meeting. I think that the document that was presented to us, the S1 version today, is a workable document. The only objection I have is to the insurance language. I think it's self-defeating. I think it negates itself, and there's no point to having that in the ordinance at all. However, I do think that it's important that the home building community have an option, and if they choose to go this route, I think that it offers enough protection for the ultimate consumer. And so I won't be supporting the motion as presented on the table.
Mr. Steele.
Mr. Bernie, again, speaking to the motion, I think a lot of people have put a lot of effort into this, and I don't want to discount intentions, or I think everyone has moved into this with a set of reasons, and each has an opinion of benefit. I go back from the original version. I do agree. I think this has made a lot of headway in terms of format and language, and I think a lot of people have put a lot of time into this. But I'm a bit concerned, when ordinance is made and said, it oftentimes is with a set of reasons that not everyone can agree with. And I'm firmly convinced that the municipality of Anchorage and the development services is still the agency to handle all forms of permitting. And I think it's something that I step back and look at, that it's done for commercial work, it's done for other form of residential than single family and 2-family. And I think what I'm hearing more is a disconnect in a relationship. And I think that another option other than this ordinance is to work on a relationship. And I don't see anyone wanting to commit to that process per se. And the fact that I think it belongs and resides in the municipality, the ordinance I put together doesn't fully show that belief, but it does show that I think this train is far away from the station and it isn't coming back for this bonding or rethinking of options. And I think there is going to be action probably taken. And with that said, I think that the role of this body is just to advise the Assembly that there are some points here that need further consideration. Now, one could amend it to say that municipal staff, which is responsible for all review now and will continue for potentially a good part of it, has advised you against it. That they feel that it's better served in that entity, in that department that's been created. And so I just think that my ordinance here is to speak softly, that caution, and these are some concerns that I don't think are fully addressed. And I've stopped short of saying, I don't support this ordinance, and that's kind of my intent on the way this was organized and thought out and proposed.
Mr. Lundey?
I guess I'll add a comment that despite my discussion tonight, I actually have support of the concept of making it easier in providing a more streamlined process. But I do think, and I'll also say that I probably won't lose any sleep if this gets passed the way it is today, because really what I think is going to be found is that you're not going to find any professionals who are going to want to certify these designs. And I do think it may take a couple of lawsuits at one point, but I don't think it's going to be a very effective alternative path. So that being said, I also want to go on record for saying I don't really support the language the way it is, because I don't think it's good language. And that's why I don't support what we have in front of us. I would like to add one more friendly amendment, and it's if we do go forward with this, Mr. Steele posed, I think it was five items that we were going to recommend to the municipality. And I think this is already brought up, but I think we ought to add to that list, as we recommend, and this is a motion that we should vote on, add number 6. We recommend providing some audit capability under Section C that allows the building official to not issue a permit if claimed defects are known. And that just captures that thought. It may be that it's going to be captured already by the municipal attorney.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Ferdinand?
if I may, I just wrote up a motion that pretty much said the exact same thing. If it's written down, I don't know if Mr. Levine.
I would let Mr. Ferdinand.
Tanner thanks you both.
I'll let Tanner read it, since I don't have that good of a memory of what it is from minutes. That's why I write it down first.
Mr. Ferdinand's amendment is, there is currently no audit provisions included to review the quality of the reviews and the effectiveness of the proposed program. Nor is there a sunset provision based on a re-review by the Assembly at a later date.
Okay, this is under items of consideration further appropriate incorporation in the final version. Okay.
If I can second that, seeing I didn't get to do that amendment.
You happy with that as written? I trust. Okay, we've got a secondary motion. Comments? Would you like to speak toward your motion here, Greg? Any additional?
Aside from what Mr. Boney stating regarding the audit provisions for building department be able to go back, we have heard testimony, or not testimony, but has been noted during our discussions that in other jurisdictions where this has been implemented, they did go back and selected random, or there were audits of the reviews based on by the municipality or the AHJ, and they found like 12 out of the 12 reviews had gross issues or something like that. I don't want to say specific numbers, but when they did go back, they did found significant issues with the third-party reviewers items. So I agree that the audit requirement should be implemented, especially in the beginning of the program. Regarding the sunset provision, the previous ordinance that came before us had a sunset provision at the end of the year, unless the Assembly brought it back up and rediscussed it. So considering this is a new way going forward, it would be nice if there was a stop and re-review, and if the program is going well through the audit process, then I think that would gain traction for the builders. Basically, the builders would be put on notice that, okay, if this does go forward, and that's built into it, then it's kind of like, okay, well, you guys are going to have to prove to the public that this is working and that your third-party reviewers are raising the bar on the reviews based on the municipality.
I just have a question. I think an audit's a good idea. I'm just not sure. So what would you do with an audit? Clearly, I think the ALS, would probably, tell the guy he's got to go back and learn something before he did another certification. But would you guys have the ability somewhere, or would that have to be written into this to tell the guy he can't certify things anymore if he fails?
Through the chair, I believe we can draw on provisions of some other jurisdictions, but my understanding is, for example, City of Phoenix has had a program in place. They put it in place 2010. They have, 2011, beginning in 2011. They get 30,000 permits a year through their department. Of those, they had 100 of those through June of 2012, so through 18 months, or call it 45,000 permits, they had 128 go through the process. Of those, their audit provisions were set up for a certain number, randomly, of what came in, plus certain projects over a certain complexity were required to be audited, so they were essentially reviewed again by the plan review. So they had 128 through the process. They audited 28 of those, and these are their numbers through June 2012. They found 7 of those to fail their audit, so it was 25% failure rate of the audit. My understanding is that, they have to correct the plans, they have to, correct the construction error, whatever that may be. And I'm not sure on what happens after that, if someone goes on probation or how that works. I'm sure there's various ways that that's handled. So we would look to some of the other jurisdictions and probably copy their language. As long as we're having this discussion, I'll throw out that City of Arlington, Texas had a similar program in place. They discontinued it after a year and a half. I didn't get numbers from them, but the gentleman I talked to said, I asked why, and he said, we absolutely had too many major design errors, and we canceled the program. So we would have to, the terms of the audit program would have to be fleshed out, but it is worthwhile.
You threw out some numbers. I was just curious, are there any numbers on the quantity of things that are found by the inspectors that are non-code compliant that were allowed? In other words, so they weren't caught during an audit, but they were caught during the inspection process.
I don't have specific numbers on that. I have talked to a couple of jurisdictions that said, yeah, we have problems in the field and we have to sort them out. They didn't give me specific numbers.
Mrs. Ramos?
I think to be fair, if they presented information like that, they'd have to also do an audit on municipally reviewed projects that have things in the field caught that may not be compliant to. So.
Doing that.
Any other questions regarding the amended motion on the table?
The second amendment?
Yes.
How does that mean? How does that? You're going to just go to number 6 and
Okay. There is currently no audit provisions included to review the quality of the reviews and the effectiveness of the proposed program, nor is there a sunset provision based on a re-review by the Assembly at a later date.
Won't the audit create a time crunch again? And, I mean, because anything can be audited. Yeah, before.
Any additional comments, questions?
And to be clear, this is amending the list of things Mr. Steele is recommending, that if the Assembly is going to pursue this, that they have a discussion about it and include in the ordinance, or at least have knowledge that they've covered through that.
Ready for the vote? Can you please?
All right, Mr. Merchant.
Nay.
Mr. Strict.
Yes.
Mr. Gray.
Yes.
Mr. Feller.
Yes.
Mr. Ferdine.
Yes.
Ms. O'Donnell.
I'm confused, this is strictly on adding this.
Just strictly add on the number 6 for an audit.
Yes.
Mr. Steele.
Yes?
Mr. Looney.
Yes.
Mr. Hawkinson. And Mr. Bowman.
Yes.
Nine to one in favor.
Okay. Back to the motion at hand. I've had a request for quite a while, what I can, if I could, I can see this is going to go a little bit, if we can take a real short break, say 5 minutes to have a toilet break here, a little bit, stretch legs. I got 8:21 by my clock, so 8:26, and we can reconvene and go with this, so everybody's got a chance. Acceptable? Yes, sir. No, we don't have to vote on that one. Take a 5 minutes recess here. This thing don't wind up that fast.
Maybe he was going to call the question.
It does happen.
Some of that,
But I am here, so it kind of seems like this is my one. Galleries and Just make with love so the calories don't count.
160.
I'll bite.
Should have gone for the look.
Did you still cough? Yeah.
squeeze that, it's hard.
The code can do.
Well, for the cookie, I'll...
There's confusion about design, pictures, and images, but it's the official result of where it is in the code.
Well, in the code language.
I remember bargaining for this one, I said yes. There's a few discussions on We haven't met in a long time. First
How's the three-member panel? When do you guys have something?
Only one.
It's a suggestion, suggestions they have. You get creative, it's a conundrum, but we're creative.
I do it if I have a get that. James? Brother is.
Okay, so there must have been your brother, I see.
That's kind of an gnarly
I keep forgetting, it was like, 4 or 5 years ago, I ran into Bobby. He had somebody like you, I was wondering if it was you or, so it's your brother, the brother married his daughter.
Yes, okay, yeah.
I used to work. I understand why. Yeah, he's having fun
There must be
Hey, who cares about this?
Spoke out.
That's where they were when I was one time. Not when I went in. Sure. I used my best pen. It's an effort. Was that this year for you, or is that? No, that was.
My sister's big. I know, it's weird. We just get all that stuff.
Research the wells.
Sorry, Bob, what are those around things?
I was only lucky.
Size. And it
He said, I knew he was the best builder.
We were back in discussing the main motion, and Mr. Feller had a question to share.
I've got a comment. So with the First Amendment, I'm afraid what the Assembly is going to see if this motion passes with the First Amendment is that the building board does not support this ordinance and this concept. And that's not the message I want to send forward to the Assembly. As I said before, we've considered this a number of times now. We've had a three-member panel that's considered it. We've addressed all those concerns. And for us to pass a motion not supporting it is not the message that I want to forward to the Assembly, so I will not be supporting the motion. That's all.
Mr. Steele?
And not to turn this into debate, but do you see a path of amending what we have before us that will make it comfortable?
Well, if the first amendment was in support of the ordinance, rather than not supporting the ordinance, then I could support the motion.
Mr. Chair, can we get that First Amendment reread in its entirety? Please.
The board recommends the building official inform the Anchorage Municipal Assembly in writing of the position of the board regarding the proposed ordinance. AO 2012-62S1. The next two were struck.
But that's not his question. His question is
The next line was didn't read.
we added by amendment here. We do not recommend this as currently written.
That was next. After we did this.
Yeah.
I think we're just wanting to hear the First Amendment to the motion.
And the amendment was, we do not recommend adoption of this ordinance as currently written. If I can add, and maybe as a discussion.
Yeah.
I'm satisfied with the way it is, but I can also see that if we pre-appended that, okay, so modified this one more time, adding a sentence in front of that that says, we support the concept of this ordinance, but we don't, but they would follow on when we do not recommend adoption of the ordinance as currently written. And then Mr. Steele identified some bigger issues that he thinks still need to be resolved. And so that would send a message to the Assembly that we support the concept of adding this ordinance language, but just currently written, it still needs some work. And I don't know if that bridges the gap.
I believe it does.
We make an amendment or motion amendment.
I forgot my pen today.
I think your language was great.
I didn't write it down.
So he's cleaning up one to amend our First Amendment regarding the current motion.
Mr. Chair.
That's the motion we've already accepted here. So it's, we agree in philosophy, but do not agree, but do not recommend this as currently written, is the paraphrase. Am I correct?
That's the paraphrase, yeah.
Okay, I've got a motion.
Well, actually, he's going to make a motion right now.
Attempting to wordsmith this plain English.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Ferdinand.
And I know we are limited left on our time here this afternoon.
No, we got
That was a long ways to go. I'm just kind of wondering, based on items 1 through 5, if there are items in here that we should amend or strike based on our conversations tonight and over the last couple of weeks that I think have been brought forward to the board. For instance, first sentence of paragraph 4, any research regarding professional liability coverage available for the insurance carriers. I think we've noted in our discussions that it is available. So I just didn't want to put things forth towards the Assembly that makes it sound like we haven't discussed it.
May I add? If this next sentence says a minimum coverage of $250,000 is required, it's only required if you choose or. So I don't think it's
But it
entirely.
identifies the paragraph where that's required.
May be required.
In that paragraph 2, it speaks to that.
Independent third-party review.
Wordsmith. Isn't it nice that you can read all these amendments in this printing and occupational hazard? Mr. Merchant?
Can I ask a question to the municipality and Anchorage Home Builders? Is now, with this written like it is, would that suffice everybody where, in regards to what we're getting ready to put down?
Speaking for the municipality, we do not support this ordinance in its current form or the concept in general, for all the reasons we've discussed tonight, particularly the potential for conflict of interest. We don't believe that it will save time or money, and we don't consider that the interest of the general public, because when all is said and done, there's not a lasting protection for the public.
And how it's going to be written, is that going to affect the way that you guys are trying to do ultimately?
Mr. Merchant, no, I think that accomplishes what we are after. I mean, you can, to use the term over and over again, you can wordsmith something to death, but I think Mr. Steele has brought up some legitimate points here for potential clarification. I mean, if you read the motion, Mr. Straight, and what I heard paraphrased, I think the home builders would be in agreement with that.
My role in this, and I guess we should clarify that the three-party reviewers, at least my position as far as being on that group, was to make sure this wasn't dead on arrival, that we were taking care of the issues that was going to make this not even able to, anyone to even be able to do it, the licensing issues. It was not to iron out all the problems that this ordinance could have on the public or the process. That wasn't our responsibility. So I personally am in favor of a third-party review process, but I think this ordinance is going about it the wrong way. I think this is going down the same path as before, where it was good intentions, but the way it is being implemented is going to make it a non-starter, just because of the liability issues that we've discussed. I think you had this gone instead through a third-party review option through the municipality of Anchorage, as the builder being able to go to the municipality and through the municipality say, we would like to go down through your third-party list of reviewers, and have the municipality of Anchorage randomly choose that third-party reviewers. That would provide the same end goal, which is you would have a professional, licensed professional reviewing your documents, and it wouldn't be the municipality of Anchorage reviewers. It would be a third party. You would get that same, aside from the day it takes to go in and say, we'd like this person. It would still give you that streamlined third-party review. The difference is that because that would occur underneath the umbrella of the municipality review, you'll actually get people signed up who will do it. I think there is a huge concern that it might be a non-starter to where no one's going to take on that liability. So I guess going back, had this process gone through where it was an umbrella underneath the municipality permit review and a third-party option that way, I would be in favor. But as it goes right now, I would agree with previous statements. I think all this created was a scapegoat for another lawyer to sue, and I don't think that's going to be in the best interest of the public. And I just don't know if it's a working solution. That's my concern, is that we went through all this effort again for something that's never going to be used. Whereas had it been the same process gone through an alternate path, it would be something that could be used by the building department and the public.
Mr. Looney?
I very much agree with Mr. Perdeen's comment. You know, the one challenge I would have is that if the reviewer was working as a consultant in municipal automatic review, so a builder could go in and ask for, you know, plan review by a third-party consultant. I'm not sure, because right now you require structural drawings to be reviewed by a professional engineer, correct?
Not for us.
Only required by state law.
Okay, so for residential, they're not. So a designer could do that, but somebody could come in and ask for third-party review. I mean, and pay for the additional cost of using a third-party reviewer. Would that be a viable alternative to this process?
Correct, that process is in place right now. I think the downside to that process is there's an additional 25% charge on the permit fee. So there's more money involved.
But however, I mean, I don't know that it's a cost issue for you guys, it's a timeliness issue. And it also solves the issue of liability, because you still have the plan reviewer would be behind the, you know, the protection of the municipality, I'll bet they'd have to carry, in order to be a sub-consultant to the municipality for doing some of these, they would have to carry appropriate E&O insurance, but it would be a much more viable process and much more insurable process to do it that way. And, you know, I'd really recommend that, you know, that this process not go forward, but some method like that be worked out that would accomplish the same thing, but actually, in my opinion, it would be a superior product that you get in the end run, because it'd be available. You'd have, the municipality could work with professionals. I mean, they could, you know, have they could select professionals who would work under that, with prearranged fee structure. Then they would know we're up to date with the latest municipality requirements, and they would be vetted, you know, working under with municipality acreage inspectors. So I think the overall product would be a whole lot better than what we're trying to accomplish here.
Mrs. Brown?
We discussed this at the last meeting, and I had not known this, that you do have third-party review available through Reed Middleton and Fuller Associates, those are contractor reviewers, engineering firms. But is it you choose to send it out when you're overloaded, or does the person walking in asking for it literally have the option to choose that now?
They have the option to choose that now.
You can see it in the fee schedule. I think it's actually probably contained in this ordinance. It's not as clear as it should be. There's an assumption we're planning to change it for next cycle, because it's not really discussed in the wording of the listing title, but it is in the fee schedule to allow for it. It's owner requested, it's on page 6 of 8, and it's owner requested commercial outsourcing plan review. Although we had, if someone asked for that residential, we would do it. But there would be a slight difference. So that exists right now. And there's 2 contractors to the municipality on the books for that. And that is, the change I would see to that would be to, these 2 right now are under contract with us to, if we call up, say we need to do a review, we send them the plans and they do it. We recently did that 2 weeks ago, and we found that, well, their reviewers were on vacation and they couldn't find it either. But they did, they did, best they could. I think a slight change we would make to it, if, under what Mr. Perdeen is saying, is we would have a group that's not, we'd have to work with purchasing to expand that list, because right now we have to fund all those contracts. We can't have a contract with somebody unless we have funding in place for them, appropriate things set aside to pay them if we use them. So we'd have to tweak that. We'd have to make some changes to the current situation, but it is an option available right now.
So, but this literally does say just for commercial. It does not apply to residential, this outsourcing.
True. By policy, though, if someone had asked for residential, we'd do it. And we've mentioned that to people. We told people that when they've asked about it.
Mr. Strader, are you prepared for an amendment?
I believe so.
Hold that.
I'd like to make amendment to be placed in front of amendment number 1 to the motion on the table. And the Public Board supports the concept of option for independent third-party review for single and two-family building permits. However, and then going on into the language from the previous motion. All of my logic there. Yep.
No, that's not a strike amendment on that.
That goes right in the beginning of that one.
There's not
Correct.
language in there.
The summary of it is we support the idea, however, we don't support the current language of this due to these questions that need to be addressed. Do you like the concept of the language sounds like?
For a second. Moved and seconded. Would you like to speak to your motion, Mr. Straight?
What I just did.
Okay. Other discussion? Hearing none. Call for vote on that.
Mr. Chair, may I request that we vote by ballot in this case?
You knew that.
For the record, so the votes are public, who votes how, correct?
The results.
There is
are
no
published.
secret ballot. No, that's correct.
I'm not sure what the rules of procedure actually do say. It's pretty unusual to vote by ballot unless you're voting chair and vice chair, and then that's typically done, but the majority of the regulatory boards vote in an open, public manner.
I thought you could do that, but the results were announced at this time.
Like I said, I'm not sure what Title IV says about voting,
Maybe you can go to the code.
I'm not hooked up to the internet. Well, no, I meant that screen.
Bill Gates versus iPad over here is going on.
Which, Title 4? 3, 4.
You don't want to put up. It can't be appealable, like insinuation, yeah.
you know, we'll keep looking for it. It's advisory, it's legislative, you're not taking a adjudicatory action to take your ballot out. You want to do it. We'll find out what.
Correct, add a sentence.
That's correct. Take one pass it down.
Or Mr. Chair suggested you might want to ask the pleasure of the board if they prefer to take a vote on whether or not to secret but other public votes.
Discussion on that? Anybody,
If I'm right, Mr. Chair, I would just point out that I think we should be as transparent as possible in terms of how we interact, and I don't take anything personal, and I would hope no one else does. And I'd hate to think that it would influence the vote that much if we do it in that manner. That's just my thoughts on it. I think we should strive to be as transparent as possible in how we conduct our business in public.
Definitely makes reconsider kind of hard.
pardon me?
No one's gonna be able to reconsider the vote. Oh, no, I voted that
Good
one.
point, Jeff Van Wasn't.
After we'll be reconsidered.
This is just an amendment.
Mr. Chair, I would say just in support of my idea that this is a pretty touchy topic. There's a lot of people in this room, there's a lot of public involvement with a lot of strong feelings, and we want to make sure that people can vote their conscience and not worry about any recourse or any discussion outside of this group.
We could have the same rules as the assembly.
It says right here in your reports, minutes and public records, the Board of Commissions shall keep minutes of boards and commissions proceedings. Such minutes shall record the vote of each member physically present upon every question formally presented to the board. So you should vote in the open, not a secret ballot.
Okay. And as mentioned, I hope everybody can be professional and respect everybody's opinions. You're ready.
So can we go over exactly what we're voting on right now?
Exactly.
This is just his amendment?
Correct.
Okay.
Adds the wording.
Building board supports the concept of an option for independent third-party review for single and two-family building permits.
However.
Would you mind reading the however portion as well?
Did you have that one?
However, the board recommends the building official inform the municipality, the Anchorage Municipal Assembly in writing of the position of the board regarding the proposed ordinance number.
My impression was that that first paragraph was going to state, and this is going to get inserted right before the First Amendment.
That is correct. It does not replace it, sits right in the beginning.
So the way the first two paragraphs would read then is the board recommends the building official inform the Anchorage Municipal Assembly in writing of the position of the board regarding the proposed ordinance. And the next paragraph is the building board supports the concept of an option for independent third-party review for single and two-family building permits. First Amendment, we do not recommend adoption of this ordinance as currently written.
Oh, right, I put it in the wrong spot. My apologies on that.
So I think that's how it all flowed. And then the next paragraph would be, the board recognizes Anchorage municipality may choose to adopt this version or further modified ordinance. And then it goes into the points Mr. Steen.
I put it in the wrong spot when I read it. I apologize for that. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Regarding Mr. Straight's concern, I believe the board members do have the opportunity to abstain from their vote. If you do not want to do yes or no, I believe you have the option of abstaining.
And the vote then, as I understand it, is present. That's what I read. I was reading
Or you just woke up in the middle of the meeting.
Mr. Merchant?
Yay.
Mr. Straight?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
No.
Mr. Feller?
Yes.
Mr. Ferdine?
Yes.
Ms. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
No.
Mr. Mooney?
No.
Mr. Hawkinson? It's tied, 5-5.
The coin toss?
No, that is, motion fails because it didn't carry more than majority.
Oh, Michael's is not here.
Back to the motion. Comments, discussions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Stevens?
I'd like to propose an amendment, and that is in item number 4. Has there been any research by the MOA to confirm professional liability coverage is available with insurance carriers serving Anchorage, and then the reference? I would like to strike that first sentence.
Second that. Basically, this is made and seconded by the makers. Do we really need to vote on that, or can we just make that as a...
I can, well, no, on the second, I don't know if I can make a motion on the amendment to the amendment. I don't know if I can.
I'm really wondering if it's an amendment to the amendment, or if it's just an amendment to the motion.
And a friendly amendment that you can accept.
Yeah, what I'm thinking of is just a friendly amendment that the second accepts it. It's in. Mr. Steele? Is that an amendment to your original motion?
Can you friendly his originally?
It's a change to my motion, and if the board wishes to handle it in the manner of the maker of the motion, and the second is being friendly, I'm fine with that, and then is just support it.
Is everybody in favor of that?
I think it's a clarification based on our discussion, so I think it's reasonable.
Any opposition to it? Seeing none, we'll make that deletion then. So we're taking out half of the line, the first half of number 4.
First sentence.
Not all of it. You're like that, okay. Okay, anything else? Are we ready for vote? Mr. Gray?
Can we clarify what we're voting on?
We have a main motion with 2 amendments. Amendment 1 is to add the sentence, "We do not recommend this as currently written." More to it than that? No, that's that. That is right after the first paragraph. And Amendment 2 is regarding, an addition regarding the audit capability.
And sunset.
Yeah.
In sunset, excuse me.
Understood?
Amendment 3 is striking that.
So now we're voting on the whole thing, or we're preparing to.
What was 3?
I was striking that first sentence, so it was a friendly amendment. So you may proceed with it.
Okay. We got them. Are we clear what we were voting on? Any questions?
Do we still have for discussion?
George, we haven't called it yet. Go ahead.
I just want to reiterate that I feel we should take a position if this, I guess this becomes a position now that we are recommending against, definitely against the proposal or the ordinance, but I feel we should take a position on the concept. It sounds like we've done so with, well, we have a 50-50 tie in doing so. I don't think we'll get it one way or another with that, but I feel we should come to some resolution, yes, no, or maybe.
I think this motion now, I think this motion now does that. The paragraph, so my amendment was paragraph 2. Paragraph 3, Mr. Steele, I think clearly, states that, while we recognize municipality as, may and probably will adopt the ordinance, it's recommending some additional things be looked at. That's what items now 1 through 6 are. So I don't think we're sending the message that we're, totally opposed to it or totally, but it is saying that currently as written, it's not acceptable language. So I think it's kind of meets in the middle a little bit. And I think with Mr. Steele in agreement that I think there's enough momentum right now, there is probably going to be some sort of an ordinance change.
Other questions? Can we call for vote? Okay, let's go.
Mr. Merchant?
No?
Mr. Straight?
Present.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Feller?
No.
Mr. Fradine?
Yes.
Mr. Michaels? Oh. Ms. O'Donnell?
No.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mr. Looney?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkinson? And Mr. Boone?
Yes.
5 to 5.
5 to 4 is...
That's 5 to 4.
6 to pass.
5 to 4 is the whole thing.
6 to pass.
I think we need 6 to pass.
It's 6 to pass. That's
That should be 5 to 5 with the president as a vote.
Yeah, it's 5 to 4.
5 4, thank you.
So what do we gotta do to fix it, guys?
Does that notate that we have to have 6 for a yes?
You have to have a majority of the fully constituted board, which is 6, unless there's a conflict of interest. If there's a conflict of interest and the board excuses that person for a conflict of interest. And
Actually, fully constituted board is 12 now.
what's 12? So
It's
7.
going to be 13.
Well,
So even if, how much is a quorum?
13 thing.
How much is considered a quorum?
It's a duly appointed board.
One time, we'll take it. Fully constituted board now is 12 because of
Well,
the...
okay, the fully constituted board, whether all the seats are filled or not, actually is 13. There's 12 people on it right now. That was one of the clarifications that Dennis sent forward to Mr. Trombley's previous ordinance that hasn't been responded to yet. So, that, 13.
7 is a majority unless you have a conflict of interest with financial reason for that board to
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Steele?
in terms of reconsideration, what would be viewed as the favorable side of this last vote?
Can you repeat the question, please?
I mean, the vote was 5 to 4, and I'm assuming it was 5 yes, or am I backward?
It's 5 in favor, yes.
prevailing side, whichever number had the most on the prevailing side.
Okay. So another option would be immediate reconsideration, which would bring the motion back if everyone was willing to deal with it more, then we could then deliberate more. Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to move for immediate reconsideration.
Second.
Did you vote yes then? But don't you have to be on the appointed side?
Well, I thought the yes was the 5.
Put the motion there. thought we said we had to have 6 yeses for a motion to pass.
7.
So then, would we people voting on our 3 positions? Because they're on the winning side.
Okay, so
I don't know.
Is there a prevailing
It's
side?
too late. I'm splitting hairs, I apologize.
Okay, so there is a prevailing side even if there is something not to pass it. Okay. 35 years of business.
well, how lenient more, I think we need to keep working.
Regardless, we got to action it out, so.
Compound it.
I would argue this area.
What are we gonna do with this?
Procedure.
They're not going to debate you, Jerry.
Is this, let me just ask the question, are we philosophically to the point that we are split and cannot come to resolution?
I think we are. I mean, I think the third amendment kind of brought that to light, that we are, we're just kind of split.
Well, that's what we should tell you Sunday.
You can do that by your record and your voting, or you can put another motion forward.
I would make a motion that we advise the Assembly that we are split philosophically by the record of this meeting.
So, discussion, would it be split philosophically on the need for this ordinance or on the wording of this ordinance?
I think both fit.
It's kind of open on what we're split on.
I think we're split philosophically.
May I ask if, as part of that, would you include these minutes as we have dealt with them so far? That we are split philosophically based
Absolutely.
on
I'm going
this?
to make that's in my motion that we include the minutes for this meeting.
Okay.
Now, would those be the reviewed and approved minutes?
Last 2 meetings ago.
Can you do it by the
Recording?
recording? By the recording of the meetings? If I can just let Mr. If I can remind everyone of the timing, the assembly work session is on Friday. It will, so I presume you want the outcome of the meeting to be known to them.
What time is it, for my record?
11:30
11:30?
at City Hall, 11:30 to 12:30. So just logistically, that means to get the minutes of the meeting, Hannah's going to be spending all day tomorrow, probably part of the night, getting minutes squared away. But we can do it. So we can do the minutes of the meeting. It's just been Mr., we can do the draft minutes of the meeting. might be the way to go.
My question wasn't the
That's
minutes
in
of
my
the
motion,
meeting. It was-
that we present the draft minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, my question was, are we going to include this original motion here that?
It would be included in the minutes.
Yeah, it would all be included in the minutes.
Mr. Steele?
Do we have a second on the,
No, we do not.
well, maybe not wanting to speak to it until then?
Well, she hasn't made it formal, she's still writing, so.
I guess I'm just, if I may just have a moment, I, as a member, would be comfortable if the chair was available to personally represent that at the work session if the assembly cared to hear that in terms of philosophical difference. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Mr. Winter, even though if you're available, but I think delivering the message, staff, draft minutes, or even having you there, but
I was formally or informally invited to the last work session that was canceled due to lack of attendance from assembly members. And I am assuming that I will be asked to attend this. I don't know if I will be asked to speak to it, but
To clarify, assembly work sessions are public events. They're noticed to the public. Anyone from the public can attend. They're not, and I would encourage everyone with an interest in the subject to attend. The difference is there is no public hearing, although assembly can acknowledge people who are present and ask them questions if they happen to be present.
Discussion on the current motion. Would it be better instead of
Including a large, massive words of our minutes that may or may not be read to
adding that we're split into this, we're split, and
as part of that split, we feel that
we would take out the first three paragraphs, the board is split, and then go into the board recognizes that it'll get passed anyway, and you should look at this.
Let's see what Ms. O'Donnell has written here.
Ms. O'Donnell's motion is to recommend to the Assembly that the building board is split philosophically on the accepting or rejecting the concept of the AO, and that the draft minutes be presented to the Assembly work session on Friday, on the date, 9/14/12.
And that would include this motion? Yep. So that includes the motion that we're stood on.
On page 17 of our minutes.
If I can add a comment, you know, in kind of a friendly comment, I think, that Ms. O'Donnell's. If we inserted right after the board recommends building official, and we have to, you know, remake this motion. The board recommends building official inform the municipality of assembly in writing the petition of the board, the ordinance. And then the very next sentence is the board is split on the need for this ordinance, okay? We do not, you know, and maybe we can add to it saying that, you know, but then the next one would be, we do not recommend adoption of this ordinance as currently written. I mean, does that kind of fill the same ground, but then we encapsulate all of this in this one page recommendation that Mr. Steele had with a couple of amendments we've already discussed in the past?
it still comes across as a very strong negative towards the.
And I think that's what I'm trying to say, is that we've been over this for, what, 10, 12 hours now?
Okay.
And there's some pros, there's some cons. There's been a lot of good discussion, a lot of very strong opinions, and I think a lot of valid points made by everybody on the board, the public, staff, everyone. And I think that we're not here to make policy. And that's their job. And I think that if they can see the discussion that has taken place and the fact that we're philosophically divided as to whether we believe that this ordinance is needed, that it's a good idea, or that it's a bad idea, that's what they need to hear. We're not here to recommend it, not recommend it. If you don't believe in it and it goes to the Assembly, you can go and speak to the Assembly in public as to your supporting it or not supporting it. Nobody created it to do that. But as a body, I think we've got too many diverse opinions to say, yes, we support it, but not as written, or we don't support it as written, but maybe philosophically we like it. I just don't think that we're in agreement at all.
I'll second the motion.
Second. Any further discussion from you, Ms. O'Donnell?
Clarification, this is Ms. O'Donnell's original motion and not Mr. Looney's.
That is correct.
As a comment, I'm probably opposed to it right now, I'm mulling it over, but because I think it's more than philosophical, I think there's structural issues with the ordinance that is in front of us.
Oh, I agree with you.
So I'm more than just philosophically against it, I'm probably more opposed to it because of the structure of the ordinance.
Just to ask a question, do you want to add behind philosophically and
Technically?
And technically?
Well, yes, we're in technical disagreement as well, and that is the reason. That's yeah, it's a big part of it.
Would you like to add that as part of your motion?
Yes, I'm ready.
Question if I may, but if we say we're technically opposed, that could be taken a number of different ways by,
Let's put philosophically on the accepting or rejecting the concept of the AO.
It talks about the philosophy of the concept,
The
yeah.
concept of the ordinance. No, I don't want to amend this.
Put another one out there if we want to talk more.
And can you be sure what's on screen exactly what the ordinance says?
On Ms. O'Donnell's, it is.
Motion to,
Motion to,
made a motion to,
motion to recommend
To the Assembly.
to the Assembly that the building board is split philosophically on the accepting and rejecting the concept of AO.
Of the ordinance, proposed ordinance, that was my short answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not a feeler, I'm a feller.
Would make for good reading, though.
And that the draft minutes be presented to the Assembly work session on Friday, September 14th, 2012.
Is the last D in the first sentence needed?
Yeah, it's a redundancy.
That
What was that?
Delete the V at the end of the first sentence. First line.
Philosophically among the accepting versus philosophically.
Not accepting the very last "the" over here.
This one.
Yeah. That one?
And the building board.
Is that right?
are you recommending this, or are you revising this?
Recommending that staff,
Oh, recommended that, okay.
that staff, motion, that staff recommend to the Assembly. That's what you do, correct?
Staff inform the Assembly that the building board is split philosophically.
That staff inform the Assembly. To recommend that staff inform the Assembly.
Us more when you're looking over your shoulder rather than down, kind of.
That staff inform the Assembly.
There you go.
Form.
I guess I have a question on the motion is,
Does the second accept this?
yes,
Okay. Mr. Ferdine?
the key word, the concept. I still don't understand what the disagreement we have with the concept. Are we, the concept being third-party review, period? The concept being third-party review outside of the municipality's review? Or, I mean, what concept are we at philosophical odds? Because we had the motion that the support of the concept of a third-party review by a professional person, and that was not approved. So that got me a little confused. Is the concept everything, I mean, that's what I don't know. Is the board, half the board think that it should be as is right now? Everything goes to the municipality? Is the issues board think that there should be a third party, but just not the way the ordinance is proposed? Or is it, I'm confused. I wouldn't know how to present that to the Assembly.
This meeting is scheduled from 6 to 9, and I need to leave, so either Ms. O'Donnell calls to vote, or I need to leave and let the board continue to discuss it.
I'd like to call a vote.
I'm sorry, I mean, I have to be somewhere at 6:45 that I'm committed to, I'm sorry to bring that up like that.
Mr. Feller.
Yes.
Mr. Merchant?
Yes.
Mr. Straight?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
No.
Mr. Fedin?
Yes.
Ms. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mr. Looney? Mr. Hawkinson?
Yes.
Mr. Looney?
Yes.
Okay. 8-2.
Any comments from the board?
Just if people could take a few short seconds to help Hannah and you read the tables, we appreciate it.
And I have one thing too. All the minutes recordings are on the website now. I'll send an email telling you exactly where to go.
Make sure you spin the light.